Hello and welcome to the L15weekly podcast, giving you the latest news, views and opinions from the football world. On this week's episode we are joined by Andy Madley from The Athletic, who is the Brighton correspondent. He's going to talk to us about how their season has gone so far. We've got, of course, your heroes of the week. We have also got a Premier League, EFL and Champions League update, and we are also going to be previewing the new MLS season, which starts on Saturday. So let's get straight into it, and I hope you enjoy. So on this week's episode of the L15weekly podcast, I am joined by Andy Naylor, who is the Athletic's Brighton correspondent. Andy, how are you?
Yes, I'm very well, thank you.
At the moment, Brighton are sat 15th in the Premier League. You're 3 points off the relegation zone. But to sort of get a bit of backstory on how this season has gone for you, I've got to start with the first question. Did Chris Hughton's sacking come as a surprise last season?
I think the timing of it came as a bit of a surprise because it happened so soon after the final day of the season. You know, losing to Man City on the final day, City clinching the title, Brighton was safe by then. And then it happened the very next day. I think there was an element of surprise because Chris had certainly sort of done the job expected of him in terms of keeping Brighton in the division in their first two seasons. He'd obviously taken them up as well from the Championship. Finished 15th the first time. More of a struggle second time around, 17th. And I think that is what led to the change. The direction of travel, if you like, was what worried the hierarchy.
And, Graham Potter came into the club at the start of this season. He's obviously managed Östersund in Sweden, and he's managed Swansea, which isn't the biggest and best managerial portfolio. What were your thoughts when he came into the club?
Fairly typical of Tony Bloom, the owner-chairman. Very sort of forward-thinking, sometimes a bit left field in the appointments. If you look at those that went before, I mean, Gus Poyet at the time that he was appointed, Oscar Garcia, Sami Hyypiä. So it's fairly in character, and they'd identified Graham. They'd been keeping a close eye on Graham, particularly his work at Östersund. A decent season, albeit only one season with Swansea, who'd come down, who had little money, had to lose players. He brought in some young players, notably Daniel James, who goes on to Man United. So, if you like, not that much of certainly not a CV in Premier League terms, but seen as an innovator, a bright young coach.
And obviously we've touched on where you are in the Premier League at the moment, which is 15th, 3 points above the relegation zone. How do you feel this season has gone so far?
Pretty much about what I would have expected. I think what tends to happen sometimes, first day of the season they go and win 3-0 at Watford and everyone gets a bit carried away. The club's long-term ambition, I hasten to add, is to establish themselves as a top 10 Premier League club. That's not going to happen overnight, particularly when you have that change. A change in philosophy as well. It's been quite a dramatic change in terms of the way they play. Chris's side was always very well organised. About
very good defensively.
Very strong defensively. Didn't change that much. Graham's very much more fluid and flexible in his thinking. The system changes. The positions of players change on a regular basis. He uses substitutes early, sometimes at half-time. So it's a very different approach. And I know there's not a lot of patience around in football. And of course, it goes without saying that it's very important that they retain their Premier League status. But, it is going to take time. And given those changes, like I say, they're about where I would have expected them to be.
And Graham Potter's style of play, playing out from the back, it's a bit more progressive, I'd say. But who do you think has been a key man for Brighton so far this season?
Well, if you're looking at players where the reliability is still, I mean, Lewis Dunk is having another very sound season. He's captain now.
Gareth Southgate came to watch him the other day against Sheffield United, didn't he?
Yeah, following the retirement of Bruno, who's now on the coaching staff. So again, he's been a pretty key and consistent figure, really at the heart of the defence. But they're a team without kind of obvious stars, obvious standout individuals, if you like, which is pretty much the way they've been for some time. It's very much a collective effort, and I think that's been the case again.
Yeah, and obviously it's a tight relegation battle at the moment. Obviously, you'd think that Norwich don't really have much of a chance of staying up, but above them, there's not very many points separating the teams above Norwich. Where do you think Brighton will finish this season?
Well, as you say, it's very congested, very tight. I think that is because I think the quality is actually quite good in the bottom half of the Premier League. I don't see sides who I could have identified last season straight away as struggling. You think of Huddersfield and Cardiff, who both went down.
Yeah.
Fulham had spent a lot of money, but were a bit of a mess. And even Norwich this season, I think they're going to go down. But I don't think they're a bad side.
No, they play nice football.
You've got a lot of teams in that bottom half of the table. When you look at the squad, you think quite similar. You look at the spending power, which is particularly relevant in terms of players they're able to recruit. Again, they're fishing in the same pool a lot of the time. So you've got this congestion. It's all about very fine margins. You look at Brighton's recent run, they've only won 1 in 12, which it sounds really, is bad, let's face it. But it's a little bit misleading. Within that, there have been 7 draws. And they've just been on the wrong end of some very fine margins, which happens at that level. Yeah. I think they've got enough to finish out with that bottom 3, so I can see them finishing 15th, 16th.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's all we've got time for with Andy. Andy, thank you very much for coming on.
Nice to be on.
It is time on the L15 weekly podcast to give you a bit of a Premier League update, if you like. So there were 10 fixtures in this Premier League game week, which is, comes after the bit of a winter break shenanigans, with some teams playing, some teams not playing. So let's get started with Saturday's games, and we start with the early lunchtime kick-off, which was Chelsea and Tottenham. Now, Chelsea came out on top in that game. It was 2-1 to them, with Olivier Giroud scoring after 15 minutes. A very good shot, just outside the 6-yard box after Bartley hit the bar. Then Alonso with a very neat strike into the bottom left-hand side of the goal for Hugo Lloris. And then Rudiger, Tottenham had a bit of a flurry of pressure later on in the game, and Lamela forced a own goal from Rudiger. A bit of a deflection on that one. But it was an interesting game, really, for both sides. Spurs, again, after sitting back against Leipzig in the week, they sat back again. They did have more ball possession, 51% for Spurs, but they had a lot of their possession in the latter stages of the game, with Chelsea sort of soaking up the pressure when it was 2-1, which you can understand. But Spurs straight away, they just went in and invited pressure. There was no real keeping the ball in those early stages, really. Chelsea created 12 chances compared to Spurs' 4. They just didn't look on it. They clearly miss Harry Kane and Heung-min Son, with Mora and Steven Bergwijn. Bergwijn not cutting it for me at the moment, I'm afraid. I don't think he was very good in that game. But a star man for me in that game was Marcos Alonso, who was player of the match with a rating of 8.0. He hit the woodwork once in his 3 shots. He scored the goal. He got 3 total shots, 31 accurate passes, 73% pass success, and 2 chances created. It was a very good performance from Marcos Alonso, and a good win for Chelsea. That takes them to 4th, which is where they stay, but they are 3 points clear of Manchester United and 6 away from Leicester, so they're starting to solidify that top 4 spot after losing to Manchester United last Monday night. The next game we have to talk about here on L15 Weekly is one of the 3 o'clock games, which was Burnley 3, Bournemouth 0. A pretty big game for Bournemouth, sitting towards the foot of the table. Vidra scored the first goal after 53 minutes, but not just before that, just a little bit before that. An incident came for Bournemouth where Josh King's goal was ruled out for handball. It appeared to come off Philip Billings' shoulder, which isn't actually handball. It looked like a very harsh decision, with Billing turning away from the ball, if you like. But it appears to have hit his arm and then fallen into the path of King, and he scored. Obviously, Eddie Howe rightfully very, very angry about that one. Then Vidra scored for Burnley, which was an interesting goal for them. Vidra scored 2-2 now, so that's very good form for him considering he hadn't scored before that. So, but then after 58 minutes, Bournemouth scored through Harry Wilson. He scored a goal, but VAR checked a handball incident that happened in the Bournemouth area moments earlier, and the goal was ruled out. No goal, and Burnley had a penalty. Smith appeared to handle the ball as a deep cross was whipped into the penalty area. However, nothing was given by the referee, and the play was allowed to continue, and Bournemouth break up the pitch and score. But it was brought back. They cancelled out Bournemouth's goal and gave the penalty to Burnley down the other end, and Rodriguez converted from the spot. I would be fuming about that if I was Eddie Howe. I can't see how they could do such a thing, really. How they can rule out a goal at one and end up giving the other team a penalty. I think it was a bit of a shambles, really. And then Dwight McNeil sealed the deal for Burnley with a goal, but that's been a while without a goal for Dwight McNeil, so it's probably very good for him to get the goal. Bournemouth, they were pretty decent with a 58% ball possession. Didn't quite create as many chances, with 4 big chances compared to Burnley's 6. Obviously, Bournemouth just playing the way that they have done for quite a while now. Dwight McNeil was my man of the match with a rating of 9.0, a goal and an assist, of course. 3 total shots, 23 accurate passes, 88% pass success, and 4 chances created. Very good performance from Dwight McNeil, who hasn't really been putting in the performances as of late. You just sort of feel for Bournemouth, because with a game like that, it could go either way. Now they sit 16th in the table. They're still out the relegation zone. At the moment, they're 2 points clear of West Ham, which is okay, and 1 point above Aston Villa, who are in 17th. So Bournemouth, still hope for them, but we'll have to see how that goes. Next game we're going on to is Crystal Palace and Newcastle United, and it was just a single goal that separated the two sides, which was from Patrick Van Aanholt. It was a fairly dire game, classic Crystal Palace and Roy Hodgson performance, with 44% possession but creating the most chances with 2 big chances compared to Newcastle. Newcastle were pretty poor in this game. There's a distinct lack of creativity. Joel Linton, me and Matt from Between the Lines talked about that a few weeks ago, and we just can't believe that that he's getting a starting spot for Newcastle and was worth that sort of money. There's still time for him to come out of his shell and perform for them, but he was just so poor the other day. I just can't believe that they pay that sort of money for him. But the goal came from Patrick Van Aanholt. It was a neat finish, and Valentin Lazaro, the right back for Newcastle, newly signed of course, came in and got sent off for tugging down Wilfried Zaha late in the day. But classic performance from Roy Hodgson. My man of the match came from Patrick Van Aanholt. There was nothing really to shout about this game, but Patrick Van Aanholt was pretty good with player of the match. With an 8.4 rating, he also created the most chances in the match, which was 6th. Considering he's a left back, that's pretty good return. 2 total shots, 43 accurate passes, 86% pass success, 6 chances created, as we already talked about, and 2 duels in that game as well. So that's pretty good return for Patrick Van Aanholt, but a fairly dire game at Selhurst Park. The next game we've got to talk about is Brighton and Hove Albion gaining a very valuable point against Sheffield United away. Sheffield United scored early on with a great finish from Ender Stevens' left foot, going straight into the top left corner as well. Neil Maupay equalised with some pretty poor defending, uncharacteristically from Sheffield United, but it was pretty decent. The man of the match for me has to go to Chris Basham with a rating of 7.6, 90 minutes played, 48 accurate passes, pass success of 81%, 1 chance created. He was very good in that game. He also got 2 successful dribbles and a successful tackle with 2 aerials, 1 and 4 ball recoveries. It's very good from Chris Basham. A very good point for Brighton. I think Sheffield would have been able to win that, but they've got 40 points now. Sheffield United, they're 7th in the table, only a point off the Europa League spots, so there's still opportunities for them. And as for Brighton, they're 28th. We've obviously spoken to our friend Andy Madley from The Athletic about Brighton's performances over the season, but they are 15th and they've got 28 points, which is 4 points above the relegation zone. I think Brighton will probably be just fine. The next game was a big game for Aston Villa, which they went on to lose against Southampton. It was a pretty decent performance from Southampton, but they were helped by the sort of passionless and desireless performance from the Villa players. I don't think they were very good, really, Villa, in that game. Pepe Reina was, a pretty good performance from him, even though he ended up getting caught up the field for the second goal, which was from Stuart Armstrong. Shane Long scored the first goal. Musa Gineppo was my player of the match with 6 dribbles, the most in the match. 5 chances created with 5 in the match. He also won the most duels in the match with 12. I think that was a great performance. He got an assist as well for that goal. So it was a really good performance from Southampton. But Southampton and Villa played out a good game. But Villa, they're struggling at the moment. They are only 1 point above the relegation zone. Southampton are well away in 12th place with 34 points. And they might even be looking up at the European spots and seeing if they can crash that sort of party. But on to the next game we've got for you, which is Leicester and Manchester City, which is the evening game. It went pretty well for Man City. It's a difficult game, obviously, Leicester, but they didn't have a holding midfielder. Leicester didn't, but obviously Man City focusing more on the Champions League game, which we're covering in later this episode. But Riyad Mahrez was my man of the match, playing against his former club with a rating of 8.7. He created the most chances in the match with 6. He also had the most tackles in the match with 3. He was the most fouled player in the match with 4, and won the most duels in the match with 11. He got an assist, 3 total shots, 41 accurate passes, and a pass success of 95% against his former club. It was Gabriel Jesus who got the goal against Leicester, and Kasper Schmeichel was pretty good in that game as well. He saved a penalty which came from Sergio Aguero, so that was a very good game for Kasper Schmeichel, but obviously would have preferred a win, really. But Leicester City, that was probably the most pointless second versus third class I've ever seen in my life. But big wheels keep on turning, and it's a good win for Manchester City as they look to the Real Madrid class, which we're going to talk about later on in this episode, so stay tuned for that. To move on to Sunday's fixtures now, and we start with Manchester United 3, Watford 0. In a game where Bruno Fernandes showed his worth for Manchester United. Now, I'm not a Man United fan, but a lot of them have been saying that he's the next best thing. A lot of people have been saying he's only had a couple of games, simmer down. But this game, I think that showed why he is worth quite a lot of money. If he can keep doing that week in, week out, Man United have got a real starlet on their hands. So, he scored a penalty after being brought down by Foster after 42 minutes with the penalty. Anthony Martial scored after being assisted by Bruno Fernandes after 58 minutes. And Mason Greenwood also bagged a goal after starting on the right wing, which was pretty good for him. Watford, they weren't great in that game. They are in a bit of trouble, managed by Nigel Pearson, but they are in a bit of trouble at the moment, Watford. So let's see who I thought was the best player in the game, which was Bruno Fernandes with a rating of 9.0, completing the most dribbles in the match with 3. He also created the most chances in the match with 5, and he also was the most fouled player in the match with 3. Got a goal, assist. He had 3 total shots, 46 accurate passes with a 71% pass success with 5 chances created. He was fouled 3 times, obviously. Attempted 1 tackle, won an aerial as well. So, he's doing his work defensively, but it was a really good performance from Bruno Fernandes and also Manchester United. With 58% possession going to United, they're really starting to look the part under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. 2 wins on the bounce now and 2 clean sheets as well. So very good for Manchester United. Next game we're going to talk about is Wolves 3, Norwich 0, which another outstanding game for Diogo Jota, obviously, with 2 goals in that game after his hat-trick in the Europa League clash against Espanyol, with Raul Jimenez scoring a goal as well for Wolves. They were very impressive. Diogo Jota, of course, was my man of the match with a 9.2 rating. He also hit the woodwork once. He scored twice, obviously. Only played 64 minutes. 4 total shots, 22 accurate passes with a pass accuracy of 81%, with 2 chances created. Brilliant little cameo and a chance to make it 2 hat-tricks in 2, but obviously he was bought off quite early. Poor from Norwich again. Start to worry about them. They do play some nice football. They do keep the ball, but they just keep getting, handed losses against big teams like Wolverhampton, and it's just very frustrating to be a Norwich fan at the moment. But still time to improve. Still very much, in the race to stay up. I'd say they're only 7 points off getting out of the relegation zone. Next Premier League game and the final Sunday game out of the Premier League fixtures was Arsenal 3, Everton 2, which was an interesting game. A really good win for Arteta, which was very good for Arsenal. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang scored twice later on in the first half. Calvert-Lewin scored the first goal. Eddie Nketiah equalised, and Aubameyang went and scored a goal, and then Richarlison levelled it, and Aubameyang won the game just after half-time. Really good performance from Aubameyang, but the plaudits have to go to Eddie Nketiah, who played 90 minutes, scored a goal after coming back from Leeds. 3 total shots, 14 accurate passes. He was very good. Jules won 4, so it was a very good performance from Eddie Nketiah. It leaves the 2 teams. Arsenal are 9th and Everton are 11th. So Arsenal still a chance, be it a very slim chance, of getting into the Europa League or maybe even the Champions League, but I believe they can do it. And Everton, they should also be looking up there, along with Burnley, along with Southampton, and looking up and seeing, can I make those sort of spots? Final game we've got to talk about here on L15 Weekly in the Premier League comes from the Monday night football, which was Liverpool and West Ham United. Wijnaldum opened the scoring. Diop equalised. 4-0 took West Ham ahead, and you thought, here we go, Liverpool, they might lose their winning record. No, they didn't. Salah and Mane came out and rescued Liverpool with a howler from Lucas Fabianski in that game. But my man of the match was Trent Alexander-Arnold with a rating of 8.8. He created the most chances in the match with 8. 68% pass accuracy, 39 accurate passes, 4 total shots and 2 assists in that game. So very good game for Trent Alexander-Arnold and Liverpool. Now it's time to talk about the EFL Championship here on L15 Weekly, and there were a lot of games, 2 rounds of fixtures, one on the weekend and one on Tuesday and Wednesday. So I'm going to pick out 4 teams, and I'm just going to talk about how they got on, because I think it would be too much for your poor ears if you were to listen to me ramble on about how many fixtures there were in the Championship. Let's start with my team, West Bromwich Albion, and you can't ignore how they've been doing at the moment. They're top of the league now. Back again, they sort of solidifying that form. They are 9 points clear of Fulham in 3rd, and they are also 4 points clear of Leeds in 2nd. So, how did West Brom get on? So they beat Bristol City on Saturday. They beat them 3-0. Harry Robson-Kanu with 2 goals and Callum Robinson with 1. My man of the match was Harry Robson-Kanu, obviously. And on Tuesday night, they beat Preston 2-0. Robson-Kanu again with a goal. He's just pulling out the goals. I've never been too big of a fan of Robson-Kanu, but he just seems to be putting them away recently, and it's quite hard to comprehend. And Livermore with some outstanding performances recently, I think. And he's gone and got himself a goal in that game against Preston. So there's my first team in West Bromwich Albion. The next team, it's not so good news for Brentford, who drew 2-2 with Blackburn on Saturday. Again, we covered over on Twitter. If you want to go and just have a look at the match report or things like that, go and check me out on Twitter. That is L15weekly. Adam Armstrong scored twice for Blackburn, with Ollie Watkins and Cy Benrahma scoring for Brentford. But they drew, and then they went and lost on Tuesday night, which was a stupid loss. I can't see why they've done it, but they lost to bottom of the table Luton. Goals from a Baptiste own goal and Craney, with Watkins getting one back later on. A really good debut though, on the positive note, for the young Danish right back for Brentford in Mads Roslev, who got an 8.1 rating, who I thought was really, really impressive in that game. But Brentford, at the moment, they're 5th in the table. They're struggling a little bit to hold themselves up. They're only 3 points away from anybody catching them out from outside the playoffs, so I better start looking down if I was a Brentford fan. It's time to look at Leeds now, who also had a very good game. On the weekend, they beat Reading 1-0, sort of solidifying their typical Leeds, creating loads of chances and only putting one away, and that came through Pablo Hernandez, a really good goal. But the worrying news for Leeds fans was Calvin Phillips was injured during that game, and he didn't play again against Middlesbrough, which they won, but he didn't play. Matthijs Klick, who's been a really consistent player for Leeds so far this season, scored the goal in that game. So now on to the final team we're going to talk about on our EFL Championship update, because I don't want to make this podcast too long for you. I felt last week 1 hour and 20 minutes was a bit, wrenching on your ears. So time for Charlton. So Charlton, they beat Luton in the big clash on the weekend, which was 3-1 against Luton Town. That's the one we want to talk about. So Lyle Taylor scored twice, with Lapsley scoring again and Harry Cornick scoring for Luton Town, but they went and threw it all away, losing to in crisis Sheffield Wednesday. So Charlton with a bit of up and down form there, but they'll be hoping they can sort of steer clear of the drop zone, because at the moment they are 18th and they are only 2 points above it, with Wigan, Barnsley and Luton all finding themselves in trouble. So that's it for your EFL Championship update. It's time for the weekly segment, and let's be honest, it's everybody's favourite segment. It's time for Heroes of the Week here on L15 Weekly. First player we've got on our Heroes of the Week segment is Christopher Nkunku, who got 4 assists in the game for RB Leipzig against Schalke. So let's have a look at his stats in that game. Obviously 4 assists in that game, 90 minutes played, 4 assists, 4 total shots, 33 accurate passes, a pass success rate of 94% and 13 chances created. What a performance from Christian Nkunku. Well worth being in the Heroes of the Week. Let's have a look at how his season has gone so far. So in the Bundesliga, he's got 4 goals, 11 assists in 21 appearances with a 7.3 average rating. He's played 1,286 minutes. He's got 381 accurate passes with 87% accuracy. He's also got 16 shots on target, 37 dribbles succeeded and 7 tackles succeeded. So a great season so far. Christian Nkunku, obviously he'll be looking forward to the Champions League game very soon, which will be very interesting to see if they can hold on to that lead against Tottenham Hotspur. Next hero of the week is one that you could probably point out every single week, and that's Lionel Messi. And we would probably put him in every week, but this week was a particularly special week for Lionel Messi. He gained 4 goals in his game against FC Eibar in a 5-0 win. So let's have a look at Messi's stats inside that game. So he's player of the match with a rating of 9.7. Martin Braithwaite got 2 assists for him. He completed the most dribbles in the match with 2, 4 goals, 5 total shots, 39 accurate passes and a pass success of 75%. All 5 of his shots were on target. 4 of them went in. So clinical from Lionel Messi. What more can you say about the man, apart from just keep using superlatives about how good he is? So let's have a look at how he's been playing so far. In this season, he's got 20 appearances, 18 goals, highest in the league, an 8.51 average rating, 1,710 minutes played. He also has got 51 key passes, 920 accurate passes, 51 shots on target, 107 dribbles succeeded and 7 tackles succeeded. So an amazing return from Lionel Messi this season. Who says he's dropping off? Absolutely nobody. An incredible form for Lionel Messi. Next player, the third hero of the week, goes to John Cordoba, who was the player of the match in the Köln versus Hertha Berlin game, in a game which Köln won 5-0. Cordoba got a goal and an assist. He was player of the match with a 9.2 rating, played 73 minutes, got 2 goals and an assist, 4 total shots, 9 accurate passes with a pass success of 75%, 3 chances created. He had an outstanding game. So let's have a look at his season so far. It's not been the stellar season you'd hope from John Cordoba, with 19 games played, 9 goals and an assist, with a 6.72 average rating. So John Cordoba, well-deserved hero of the week with 3rd. Next player we are going to talk about is a slightly abstract league, which is Shamrock Rovers' Graham Burke. Actually, I should say Preston North End's Graham Burke. He is on loan at Shamrock Rovers, and he scored 5 goals in their 6-0 win against Cork City. I don't really know how to describe that one, actually, but that's how Graham Burke did in that game. So let's have a look at his stats over the season. So he has played 2 games in the Irish Premier Division with 5 goals so far. That's all to really say about Graham Burke, really. Not many stats on the Irish League, but a well-deserved hero of the week, Graham Burke. It is time for an even more obscure hero of the week, and it belongs to Dominik Stroh-Engel, who plays for Unterhaching in the 3rd tier of the German league. He scored a hefty ton of goals in their 5-3 game against, I don't even know what that is, Halle Secha FC, but he also scored an own goal. He scored a hat-trick in that game, but he also scored an own goal. So Stroh-Engel is the hero of the week for this week. He also, this season, has got a hefty number of goals, with 9 goals. It won't even tell me how many appearances he's got. And that is how obscure this league is. But there we go, Stroh-Engel with the hero of the week. On this week's episode of L15 Weekly, we are joined by MLS expert Dylan. Dylan, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
So as the MLS season starts on the 29th, which is the day after this is going to come out, we are going to be giving you a bit of a season preview, showing where me and Dylan think that all the teams in the MLS are going to finish. So let's start in the Eastern Conference, and we'll start with the new team, Inter Miami. So Inter Miami, they've made quite a few new signings. They are one of the new And as one of the new expansion teams, Inter Miami got the first pick in the MLS Super Draft, where they chose to bring in Robbie Robinson. Dylan, what do you make of their business in the transfer window so far?
Well, I think they've made some good transfers this window, with the likes of Rodolfo Perez, Jerome Keyswetter and Luis Robles.
I think Will Trapp has been a good addition for Inter Miami, signing from Columbus Crew. He's got a few US men's national team caps. Dylan, where do you think that Inter Miami are going to finish this season?
I think they'll finish 11th in the Eastern Conference.
We differ on views a little. I've got third in the Eastern. I think they'll finish third because although they are a new team, they have made quite a lot of good additions, and they've got very strong financial backing, obviously being owned by David Beckham. Why do you think they'll finish 11th?
Well, I think they'll finish 11th because although they've got many experienced MLS players, none of these players have had a real chance to gel and play with each other, and I just don't think they've got the overall experience to do well.
And the next team we're going to look at is also in the Eastern Conference, and they are the team that finished bottom last season, and that is Cincinnati. Dylan, they've brought in a few players, but not many MLS experienced players. Who do you think is going to make an impact for FC Cincinnati?
Well, Yuya Kubo from Ghent is a good signing, and will be sure to partner Jurgen Lacadia up front. However, I think in the midfield and the defence they don't have much experience other than Kendall Waston, who will hopefully pull the back line together.
And where do you think FC Cincinnati will finish in the Eastern Conference?
Well, I don't think they'll make any improvements from last year, and I think they'll get a 12th place finish again.
I've got them down for a slightly higher finish, up half of the table actually. In 6th I've got Cincinnati, just simply because they look like they've got a pretty strong attack. I know Jurgen Lacadia couldn't really cut it in the Premier League, but I think he may be able to work some magic in the MLS. But I think they've only got really one defender in Kendall Waston, who is going to be alright for Cincinnati. Next team we're going to talk about here on the MLS special is Orlando. Well, they've brought in some players, but they've let quite a lot go to other MLS clubs. Dylan, what do you make of Orlando?
Well, the fact that they've released or sold so many players and haven't really bought many in, except from the players from the Super Draft, I think they've lost a lot of experience, and I don't think they've got the capacity to have a good go at it this season, so I think they'll be looking at bottom of the table.
I've also got them for 13th of the Eastern Conference, bottom of the table. So now let's move on to the team that finished 10th placed in the Eastern Conference last year. That is Columbus Crew, and obviously they've brought in quite a few decent players. They've brought in a very good keeper in Eloy Room from PSV. Dylan, what do you make of their business so far?
Well, I think they haven't done much this season. They've brought in MLS journeyman Darlington Nagby, and they're still relying on players such as Yassi Zardes to provide them the goals.
Well, he's a proven MLS goal scorer. He scored 13 goals last season in the 2019 season, 19 the season before for LA Galaxy, but obviously that was probably in a better team. And they've got some very decent players for Columbus Crew. They've got Pedro Santos, who obviously scores goals, he assists. He got 11 goals and 5 assists last season. Where are you putting Columbus Crew in your predictions?
Once again, similar to Cincinnati, I've got them keeping their 10th place this season, no improvement.
I've got them one from bottom, I've got them in 12th place. And we are now going to talk about the Canadian side who finished 9th last term, which is Montreal Impact, and they have lost a huge name in Ignacio Piatti. They lost him to San Lorenzo in Argentina. Dylan, what do you make of their lack of transfer business?
I think the defence would be looking pretty shaky if they hadn't managed to extend Rod Fanny's contract for another year, but in the midfield and the attack, especially after the loss of Piatti, they're going to be looking to rely on players such as Bojan and Stefan Taider this season.
And they're managed by Thierry Henry. This is his first season in charge of Montreal. It'll be interesting to see if he can take them to the playoffs. Where have you got them down in your predictions?
I've got them just above Columbus in 9th, and I don't see them challenging for the playoffs this season.
I've got them just above Columbus in 11th for me. Next, we're moving on to the team who have had a complete club franchise rebrand with a new logo, new stadium, and that is Chicago. So they've brought in a few players, a few different players, but they have let go a couple of key players. Dylan, what do you make of Chicago?
I think the attack's looking good now, especially with the introduction of Robert Berich. Him and CJ Sapong up front together could do well. However, the lack of experience in midfield and no real names in defence except from Francisco Calvo could make them struggle in their run for a playoff this season.
I think getting rid of Nicolas Gaitan to Lille is probably going to hinder them the most. And Alexander Katai to LA Galaxy is also going to be a bit of a difficulty, but I think they have put in a pretty decent striker in Robert Beric, who although I wouldn't say he really cut it in the French league, but 9 goals and 7 goals in the last 2 seasons is okay. Dylan, where do you think Chicago are going to finish in your predictions?
Well, I've got them finishing 8th, just shy of the relegation spot, but they could spring some surprises and get in there.
I've got them for 7th, and I think that they may just edge a playoff place, but obviously things can change. But obviously earlier I did have them down quite high in 3rd, but I had to change things up because I thought it might be wrong to put Chicago too high up, considering we haven't seen this sort of new team play together. The next team we're going to talk about is New England Revolution, who had a pretty underwhelming season last year, but they've made a few transfers, but not too many, but they've let go of a hefty chunk of their quite in-depth squad. Dylan, what do you make of New England Revolution?
I think their squad is overall, I don't think it's got much worse, I don't think it's got much better either.
Yeah.
I think it's stayed the same. I think if Carles Gill can get back onto top form, I think New England could be pushing towards the playoffs this season, but I don't think they'll make it.
Well, they are the MLS bottle jobs, if you like. They have finished runner-up in the playoffs 5 times, not winning the MLS once. So where have you put New England Revolution in your predictions?
I've put them 7th. I think if they stay on top form, they could easily get the playoffs. But as we know, they are prone to bottling it, so they might just miss out.
Well, I've got them in 10th place for my predictions. I think it's going to be very interesting, but obviously, as you say, Gustavo Bo and Carlos Gil could be big players for them, but it will be interesting to see if they can perform on the big match occasions. We're now going to move on to the first of the New York side, which is New York Red Bulls, who had a 6th placed finish last season and got into the MLS playoffs. They've lost a couple of key players, but they have bought in a few new additions. Dylan, what do you think about Red Bull New York?
Well, I think the loss of Bradley Wright Phillips is going to be huge for them. They haven't bought in any real replacement. They've bought Matthias Jorgensen back in from the second team, but they don't have any notable names other than Josh Sims on loan from Southampton.
They've got Aaron Long, who West Ham were looking at for a while in this summer transfer window. So where have you got Red Bull in your predictions?
Well, despite losing Bradley Wright Phillips, I think they're still looking better than most of the teams in the league, and I think they're going to keep their 6th place and just get the playoffs, but they could miss out if it all goes wrong.
I've got them down for 9th in the table. I don't think they're strong enough to mount a playoff push at the moment. The next team we're going to move on to is the team from the capital, and that is DC United. And obviously the big issue to talk about is losing Wayne Rooney to Derby County. Dylan, where do DC United stand for you?
I think even though they've lost Rooney, they've still got a very strong midfield with the likes of Edison Flores and Emmanuel Boateng. They don't have much up front. Well, Ola Kamara might replace the goals come from Rooney, and I think overall they're still looking pretty good.
I think they've got a very strong defence. Bringing in Julian Gressel from Atlanta was a particularly good signing. I think Ola Kamara, after his year away from the MLS, will be looking to make amends and get some goals in for DC. Where have you got them down?
I've got them keeping their 5th place from last season. I think they'll comfortably get the playoffs even without Wayne Rooney.
I've got them down in 8th. I just don't think they have that many goals left in the DC United side. Now we move on to the second Canadian side in the Eastern Conference, and also last year's finalists, losing 3-1 to Seattle in the final, and that is Toronto. And they've made some reasonable additions. They've brought in Pablo Piatti from Espanyol on a free transfer, and obviously something that's just as good as a new transfer is Michael Bradley having a contract extension. Dylan, what do you think of Toronto?
I think Toronto are again going to have a brilliant season. They've got my personal favourite for MVP in Pozuelo this season. They've managed to keep hold of Josie Altidore and Michael Bradley, and I think with the addition of players like Piatti, they're going to have another brilliant season.
I think they've got Nick De Leon, who is a really good sort of wing back, and Lawrence Simon at the back for them. He's going to do some real great defending for them. Dylan, where have you got Toronto?
I've got them finishing 2nd.
I've got Toronto also finishing 2nd. I think they're going to have a very good season yet again. Moving on now to Philadelphia, who finished 3rd last season. They've made some additions, and they've also let some players go, and a few contract extensions for key players. Dylan, what do you make of Philadelphia?
I think Philadelphia once again look brilliant in defence with Ray Gaddis, Jack Elliott, Andrew Blake in goal. They've got a few decent midfield options, keeping hold of Ilsinho. but I'm not sure how they'll look up front. They don't have any particular strikers.
Also, Bedoya, when he came from Nantes a couple of years ago, it's great to see him doing so well in the MLS. Where have you got Philadelphia in your prediction table?
I've got Philadelphia finishing 4th this season, one worse than last year.
I've got them also in 4th. I just think they're struggling a little bit on the defensive side of the midfield. The next team we're going to talk about is the MLS winners of 2018, which is Atlanta United. Dylan, what do you make of this strong side?
Well, they've still got Brad Guzan in goal, and they've obviously still got Barco, and probably favourite to get top scorer this season ahead of Villa, Josef Martinez. They're just looking like unstoppable again, really.
I think they've got some really good players. They got Remedy, who plays in the midfield. He provides a real great defensive cover for the back four. They've let a couple of players go, but they've also got a few on contract extensions. Where have you got Atlanta?
Well, I think with the squad they've got, kept hold of the big names, I think they're looking to take back the Eastern Conference off New York this season.
I've also got them to finish first and maybe go and get another MLS Cup win. The next and final team in the Eastern Conference is the second New York team, and that is New York City. Dylan, what do you make of New York City?
I think they've lost a few players this season, but they've still got Maxi Morales, who's in the recent MLS Power Rankings has came 4th, so he could be up there for MVP, and he could be the one to help push them towards another title, but I think they'll just miss out.
I think making Keaton Parks' signing permanent from Benfica was an incredible signing with 22 appearances last season. He was really good for New York City. Where have you got them in your rankings then?
I've got them finishing 3rd this season, just behind Toronto.
I've got them finishing 5th place. I don't think they've got the quality to beat off sides such as Toronto and Atlanta to their title. It's now time to move on to the west side of the MLS, and we're moving on to the Western Conference, and where better to start with the new expansion team, Nashville. Dylan, what do you make of their business?
I think out of both them and Inter Miami, I think they've got a much stronger side. They've brought in the likes of Daniel Lovitz from Montreal and David Ackham and Dominic Badji from Dallas up front. So I think overall they're looking a bit stronger than Inter Miami.
I think Abu Danladi from my team Minnesota was a particularly good sign. He didn't really show up on the big occasions for Minnesota, but he was almost third choice striker, so he's not really been given that opportunity. And Walker Zimmerman coming in from LAFC was obviously an amazing signing. Dylan, where have you got Nashville in your predictions?
I've got them finishing 7th, just inside the playoff.
I'm putting Nashville in 5th place. I think they're going to have a very strong season and definitely making the playoffs. Moving on to the only Canadian side in the Western Conference, and that is Vancouver Whitecaps, with a distinct lack of business going on for Vancouver. Dylan, what do you make of them?
I think they already had a pretty poor side, as we showed last season when they finished bottom of the Western Conference. And I think the midfield and defence are looking fairly weak again, although they have done well to keep hold of Freddie Montero and Toussaint Ricketts, who are the only players that look to cause anything for them this season.
I think they've got an okay defender in Godoy. I think he's okay at best, but their midfield is just bland. Where do you think Vancouver are going to finish this season?
I've got them finishing bottom again, 13th.
I've also got them, wooden spoon in the Western Conference, 13. Now we move on to Sporting Kansas, who had an 11th place to finish in the Western Conference last season. Dylan, what do you make of Sporting Kansas?
I think their attack's looking brilliant this season. Alan Pulido, Johnny Russell stayed again. They've still got Eric Hurtado. The midfield, it's okay. Felipe Gutierrez. They've still got Zusi in defence, so I think overall it'll be a strong campaign for them.
I think they've got one of the MLS's brightest stars in Gianluca Busio, who is 17 years old. I think he's a wonderful player and has got great potential in the MLS. But they've also got some really great squad players. You've mentioned already Alan Pulido, who's come in from Chivas Guadalajara, and that's an incredible signing for them. Dylan, where do you think Sporting Kansas is going to finish this season?
I've got them finishing just inside the playoff zone in 6th. However, I think they could finish higher if all their players get to top form.
As Minnesota's rivals, I can't have them going anywhere near the playoffs, and I've stuck them straight in 10th.
we now go on to our first Texan side of the Western Conference, which is Houston Dynamo. They've made some good additions, but I'm not particularly happy with Houston. They've taken Carlos Darwin Quintero off as our top goal scorer from last season, so it's going to make things difficult for Minnesota with our creativity. You know, we're going to struggle creating chances for strikers to score this season because Houston have nicked arguably and statistically our best striker. What do you make of Houston, Dylan?
I think Houston are looking good, as you say, with the signing of Quintero, and they've still kept hold of Ellis. However, I also have a bone to pick with Houston, stealing my team Portland, stealing our best left back, Zarek Valentin. He was looking brilliant for the season, but they've gone and taken him, which makes their defence look even better alongside Adam Lundqvist.
Where do you think Houston are going to sit in the table?
I've got them finishing 8th, just outside the playoffs, but I think if Quintero and Ellis can make some sort of bonds, they might just get into the playoffs.
I think Houston will be finishing in 7th place. I think they'll just scrape the playoffs simply because of Quintero. He's going to provide that creative spark for them. The next team we're going to talk about, another Texan team, and that is Colorado Rapids. Now, I think they're in for an okay season, but they have signed Drew Moore from Toronto, who's been arguably one of the better defenders in a strong Toronto side over the years. Dylan, what do you make of Colorado Rapids?
Well, I think they've got Keontae Kamara up front, who he was okay last season, but I think their main talking point this season is the introduction of Yunus Namli. I think he's going to provide some good options, but I don't think it will be enough to really push them up the table this season.
I've also got their squad list in front of me, and they seem to only have 5 midfielders, but I assume some of them are a bit more attacking or defensive, so they've gone into the defence section. Where do you think Colorado are going to finish this season?
Well, I think they're going to go down from last season. I've got them finishing 12th, just above Vancouver.
I've got them finishing 11th. I just don't think they have the creative input in their side. Now let's move on to San Jose Earthquakes, who have made a few signings. They've brought in a few good players. Dylan, what do you make of San Jose?
Well, they've got loads of midfield options this season. They've got 11 midfielders. They've got Magnus Eriksson, who's probably going to be the best. They've got Eric Calvila, who's looking quite good. But most importantly, they've still got Chris Wondolowski, who last season broke the record for most goals in the MLS. But once again, I still don't think it's going to be enough to really boost them up the table.
Well, Wondolowski is 37 now, so you're getting to that point. Can he still do it in this league? Where do you think San Jose are going to finish?
I've got them finishing 11th, towards the bottom of the table once again.
I've got them 12th. I just can't see them making moves at the table. We now move on to our final Texan side of the Western Conference, and that is FC Dallas. Dylan, what do you make of Dallas?
I think they've got a brilliant defence. They've got youngster Reggie Cannon, who's looking to be a really stonewall defender this season alongside Matt Hedges and Rito Ziegler. They've still got a brilliant midfield. Paxton Pomacau, brilliant last season. I think he's only going to get better this season. They're slightly underwhelming with their attacking options. However, Jesus Ferreira could be better this season, and they have brought in Ondasek, who hopefully will do some magic for them.
I think Reggie Cannon is on for a great career. He's been picked for the US men's national team, and I think that's a really good thing for him. Where do you think Dallas are going to finish this season?
I've got them improving on last season's 7th place, and I've got them moving up to 5th place this year. I think they'll comfortably get the playoffs.
I've got them in 9th. I just don't think they have the attacking promise to go and get the goals in the MLS. Now we move on to your team, and as an avid Portland Timbers fan, Dylan, what are you making of your team's season?
I think last season was a bit shaky. I'm not too sure what happened, but we've strengthened so much, and I think we're easily looking to push for the title this season. We've got, as you know, the best right back in the league, Jorge Moreira.
Second.
We've got Mabiala still going strong. And then we move into the midfield, which is, we've got both the Chara brothers now. We've got Blanco and Valeri. It's just, and then we've got Felipe Mora up front, which, trust me, he's a dark horse. He's going to be up there in the Golden Boot this season.
And what happened to Brian Fernandez, Dylan?
Well, Brian Fernandez his contract wasn't terminated by Portland. It was terminated by the actual league for a drug misuse, but it's fine. We've got Felipe Mora. We've moved on to better strikers now, and Jeremy Ebobisse, he'll be challenging as well.
Where do you think Portland are going to finish this time out?
It hurts me to say it, but I think we're going to finish just below Seattle again. I don't like admitting this, but I think we're going to finish 3rd.
I've got you down in 4th place, below Seattle, unfortunately. We're now moving on to talk about the first LA team in the Western Conference. Dylan, what do you make of LA Galaxy's business?
I think they've made a brilliant signing in Alexander Katai. Not only have they improved their squad, but they've devalued the squad of Chicago, bringing him in. Chicharito is another exceptional signing. Him and Pavon could work wonders up front together. I think keeping Jonathan Dos Santos, names go on and on. I think they get on for a brilliant season.
I think the loss of Zlatan looked to be a huge loss, but Javier Hernandez from Sevilla for £7 million is going to be a very, very big move. Where do you think LA Galaxy are going to finish?
I think without Ibrahimovic, I've got them finishing 4th, just below my team Portland.
I think I've got them just above your team Portland, just simply because Chicharito is going to do bits for them. The next team we're going to talk about here on our MLS special is my team, and that is Minnesota United. Dylan, what do you make of Minnesota?
Well, I mean, they've got the second best right back in the league, Roman Metanire, and the defence is very strong. It's just the midfield as well, protected with Osvaldo Alonso. It's just the attack that might cause them some problems this season.
Well, we've got such a great defence. Ike who was the best defender in the league last time, and Romain Metanire, as voted for by the MLS experts, as the best right back in the league. Best
just
right
to
back in the
up.
league. And we've got an okay midfield. Sometimes, well, now we've got rid of Darwin Quintero, we are going to lack a bit of creativity. And getting rid of Angelo Rodriguez up front is going to cause some harm, but we've got Luis Amarilla, and he looks to be a promising signing. So Dylan, where have you stuck Minnesota in your rankings?
I've got them in 9th. I haven't got them making the playoffs, but with other teams' performances they could easily make it.
I've got us just slipping into the playoffs in 6th. I don't think we're going to have a great season like we did last year, but I think with a strong defence we'll finish 6th. The next team we're going to talk about is last season's 3rd place finishers in the MLS playoffs. So Dylan, what do you make of Real Salt Lake?
Salt Lake, they've got a strong midfield with Beckerman and Everton Luiz, but the retirement of Nick Romando is going to play pivotal for them, and I think that's going to see them fall quite far down the table.
I mean, they've got a couple of reasonable attacking midfielders. You know, Albert Rusnak, he's been doing it in the MLS for 3 years now. Last season he played 29 games, got 10 goals and 3 assists, and I think he had a good season, along with Krelach, who also had a reasonable season. He got 6 goals and 4 assists in 32 games. But it'll be interesting to see if Salt Lake can get that form back of last season. Where have you stuck Salt Lake in your predictions?
I've got them falling right down the table into 10th place.
I've got them just outside the playoffs in 8th place. I just don't think they can work that magic of last year. The next team we're going to talk about is Seattle Sounders from the Emerald City. So Dylan, what do you make of your biggest rivals, Seattle?
Well, obviously I'd like to put them down as much as I can, but their defence, they don't have many options, but the midfield and the attack make up for it, because players like Ladero, Rui Diaz, Jordan Morris, they're unbelievable players, and with Stephen Fry in goal, they're not going to put a foot wrong this season.
I think the signing of Yaimar Gomez from Union in Colombia is going to be a really good addition for them. I think he's come in for a small fee, but he's obviously been doing it in the Colombian league and the Argentinian league for quite a while now, so he's going to do some quite good work for them. Where have you put Seattle?
I've got them in 2nd, but I've been umming and ahhing about them in Portland. Obviously I support Portland, so I'm going to want to put them higher, but I think that on this moment I'm going to have to put them slightly higher.
I've put them in 2nd place. I've put them just above Portland by 2 places. But I just think they have that sort of knack of doing it in the playoffs, even if they don't have a very good season. They've won it. They've won the MLS in 2019 and 2016, and they were runners-up in 2017. I just have a bad feeling that they may do something like that again. And the final team we're going to talk about is last year's Western Conference winners, which is Los Angeles FC. Dylan, what do you make of them?
Well, I think, as I said in the previous episode, I think Kenneth Vermeer is a brilliant signing, and I think he's going to do really well. And they've still got Edward Atuesta, and the attack is second to none. It's the best in the league comfortably. They've got so many options: Rossi, Vea, Wright Phillips from Toronto. They're just looking unstoppable again.
I think last season's decline for Bradley Wright Phillips in goals for New York City, you know, he only managed to hit the net twice in 24 appearances, but the seasons before that, you can't argue with his stats. In 2018 he got 20 goals, 2017 17 goals, 2016 24 goals. He's just a proven goal scorer in this league, and next to Vea, he's just going to cause so much problems for MLS defences. Dylan, where have you stuck LAFC?
Well, the keen-eyed amongst you will know that I haven't put first place, so LAFC are my runaway winners of the Western Conference.
Also, the keener minds amongst you may have also noticed that I have left the first place spot open, and that is for LAFC. I can't see anybody topping that over them. The final thing we're going to do here as part of this MLS special is we are going to put two teams in the final, and we're going to see who we think is going to win. So Dylan, who have you got in your MLS Cup final?
Well, from the Eastern Conference, I've got Toronto in the final again, but I think they're going to just miss out again. I think they're going to be runners-up, but this time I think they're going to lose to my team, Portland. I think we've got the quality to do it, and it might be a bit of wishful thinking, but I see them doing it again.
I myself have gone for less of wishful thinking, because I don't think Minnesota have it in them as one of the newer teams to make it. But I have gone for a Seattle-Atlanta final, and I think it's time for Atlanta to win again, because I think they had a bit of a sticky season last season. You know, the first season in charge for Frank de Boer, but I think they've got it under their belt to go and win this MLS conference. That is the end of our MLS special. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Dylan, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
It's no problem. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of L15 Weekly. If you want to go and check out the various guests who've been on this episode, so you can go and check out Andy Madley from The Athletic. You can go and look at the links in the description. Follow him on Twitter. Go and look at his work on The Athletic's website. It's outstanding. You can also go and check out Dylan with his Instagram in the links below, and go and follow him on there. Thank you very much to both of those for being on this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, drop a like, please. Go and drop a like. Subscribe for more. Make sure you leave your comments for next week's Heroes of the Week and how you think the games went on this week. Thank you very much for listening to this L15 Weekly podcast. Go and follow me on Twitter. Go and follow me on Instagram at L15 Weekly. You can also go and check out my website, which posts regular articles about obscure teams on there as well, which is www.l15weekly.wixsite/podcast. So go and go and have a look at that. So thank you very much for listening to this podcast, and I'll see you next time. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.